Welcome to the Silent Epidemic, brought to you by Omnia Health Group. This is the podcast where we uncover the hidden truths about mental health. The country is in a mental health crisis, and we're here to discuss the aspects that often go unnoticed. I'm Hatice Mehmet-Quirk, I'm a therapist, and I'll be speaking with leaders from various different industries, and we'll explore how they've tackled mental health in their experiences. Today, I have my guest, Mr. Tim Buckingham, who's a senior partner of his own law firm, and he's here to talk through his experiences of mental health with me. So welcome.
Hi, Hattie. Thanks for having me.
Would you like to do a short introduction about yourself?
Sure. I've been a lawyer for a few too many years now. Always wanted to be a lawyer. When I was a kid, watching some of the programs on TV, and thought, yeah, that looks like a good job. I wanted to be a professional, but couldn't stand the thought of numbers or being a doctor and having to deal with that kind of stuff. So being a lawyer was a good option. Now run my own firm, which is a challenge because it's not just about the law, but it's about being a businessman, and it's also about being a best friend to your staff. So it's lots of different skill sets involved.
So you said from childhood it's something that you aspired to be. Did it tick your boxes?
Yeah, look, it was. You're kind of encouraged to when you're a kid. You're kind of encouraged to do your exams and what have you. And if you're lucky, you've got a vocation, right? If you're lucky, you've got something you think, I really want to be an X. And if you're really, really lucky, it's a footballer. You end up playing for England, and that's fantastic. But for the rest of us, you have to find something that fits in with what you want out of your life. And for me, it's always been one of two things. You either work to live or you live to work.
Okay. So I'm going to start with some icebreaker questions just so that we can get to know you a little bit better.
Okay.
Do you prefer mountains or beaches?
Beaches. No, that's not true. Mountains.
Okay.
Both, actually. Sorry.
Very indecisive, Tim.
No, I'm a skier. I love skiing. So right. Mountains in the winter, but then beaches.
Okay. What's your favourite way to unwind after a stressful day?
Gym.
Okay. If you could have dinner with any historical figure, who would it be?
Winston Churchill.
Winston Churchill. Why Winston Churchill?
Because he was cool, and he led us through World War II, and just a fascinating guy.
Brilliant. And if you could travel to anywhere in the world, where would you go?
I've been pretty lucky to have travelled quite a lot. Anyway, I love Australia, bits of Europe, and America's always fun. Okay.
And if you could have a superpower, what would it be?
I've got one. I mean, my brain, but no. If I had a superpower, it would be to turn back time.
Turn back time. Okay, thank you. Okay, so now that we know you a little bit better, would you be kind enough to share with us a personal story about personal experience with mental health, someone that you know, a colleague, a family member?
Look, I think it's always best to talk about yourself. So I when I was just starting off in my legal career, I moved from my first firm up to Manchester as it was partly a family move, and it was partly a move to move to a different firm, and the firm didn't work out very well for me. And law firms are a very difficult place. If you're not enjoying it, if you're not enjoying being in there, it's a very pressurized environment. When you go somewhere new, you don't know who you can trust, who you can talk to, how you can share things with people. You have to be very careful. And my home life wasn't going brilliantly either. So I was a kid, right? Yeah, I was pretty young, so it's a tough time, and I ended up getting a bout of depression. So it was how do you deal with that? And I'm going back a few years now, and really this wasn't the sort of thing that was talked about at all. I was recommended to take some time off work and try and have some counselling. They didn't really know what sort of counselling I should have. They gave me some tablets that gave me filthy headaches. And it was kind of a scattergun approach to try and do things. Now, the problem about taking time off work sick is, and if you've got a broken leg, you've got a broken leg, right? Everyone's got a broken leg, is going to have to work from home. And this was sadly before the days of email and internet and what have you. So working from home was actually quite a difficult thing to do. But if you've got depression, you're not working from home, you've got depression, right? So there's a gap. There's a why is he not in the office position. And once law firms are about people's brains, okay, and people are very scared to share that there may be something not quite functioning as it might be with their brain. So you're very nervous about who you can talk to, who you can share these things with, because of what the reaction might be. I mean, heaven forbid you talk to HR about it, because HR is a perfect way of getting information across to people that you don't necessarily want to share the message with. But I can remember having a chat with someone that I knew and I trusted, and said, look, I'm really in a bit of a bad place at the moment. And a week later, the gossip in the firm was that I'd had a breakdown.
Oh, wow.
And I was out 3 months later.
Oh, wow.
Right. So the sort of reaction to that was exactly how I feared the reaction might be. None of that went to actually sorting out my problems. As it happened, it was the best thing that happened to me, because when I moved to my next firm, I realised that actually the firm I was in was just a bad environment for me. And so moving somewhere else, at one point I was thinking, maybe law isn't for me. Maybe this isn't something I should be doing. And then you go to a new firm with a more positive environment, more interesting work, more opportunities, and things change.
So it was almost like you went into the environment. You said yourself it was a few years back. It sounds like people didn't really know how to approach the situation. You had that fear inside of worry of it spreading across the office. And as you said, unfortunately, that did happen. You were sort of forced out of the position, but then you come to learn that actually it was the environment just wasn't for you in the first place, and it worked out to be the best thing for you.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, look, in my experience, up until very recently, mental health has not been on the agenda at all in these places. And at the time, even if I'd gone to HR and said, I've got this problem, they wouldn't have had a clue what to do.
Yeah. So there was almost like a lack of understanding at the time.
Yeah.
Do you think that's changed?
No.
You still feel that people go into HR, there would be that nervousness, there would be that fear of how am I going to be perceived if I say I've got this problem?
So I'm quite fortunate now in that I've been able to talk to. As you get older, you talk to more people. People are a bit more relaxed about their journeys and their experiences. Yeah. So I've been very fortunate, and particularly talking to people like Mark, who's very clear on the misunderstandings around mental health and how people are not diagnosed properly at an early enough stage, and even now people talk about ADHD, and it seems to be it's a popular thing to have. Right? It's not the popular thing to have. It's an illness. Right? At the time, people would not have had a clue what to do with this. And at the heart of this is that if a client is paying you money for your brain, and there's something wrong with your brain that means you're not performing to the best of your abilities for whatever reason that might be, that's a problem for the client, and therefore it's a problem for the firm. And I'm not sure how you ever properly address that. There's certain things you can do, obviously, to help the situation. Yeah. But fundamentally, if you're really ill, and there are obviously degrees, but if you're really, really ill, it's a real problem about whether or not you should in fact be in the office doing a job if you're full of medication and not thinking straight.
Yeah. So there's almost that concern of actually, if you're not feeling yourself, if you're impacted by the medication that you're taking, can you give your client the best service that they're paying for?
And then that becomes a vicious circle, because then you know that the piece of work you've just done isn't necessarily the best piece of work that you've done. You start to play tricks with yourself. So you start pushing deadlines a little bit, and then working really, really, really hard just before the deadline comes up, just to produce something. You're almost testing yourself to see how far you can go before you snap.
Yeah, so it's almost like you just keep piling on the pressure, waiting to see where you're going to get to.
Yeah, because something's going to happen, because it's life, right? That's life. That's your job. That's your career. No one's going to wave a magic wand. Not everyone wins the national lottery every week. So you have to come up with coping mechanisms.
Even though it sounds like what you're describing, they're not really coping
No,
mechanisms.
they're avoidance.
Yeah. Sounds tough.
So not every law firm is the same. Obviously, some law firms. I've been very fortunate. I've worked for two of the biggest law firms in the world, and had a fantastic time at both firms. They're absolutely brilliant firms to work with. But the reality is that law firms make money by converting you working for 5 minutes into cash. And so, provided you're working for 5 minutes on a regular basis, everything works fine. If something interrupts that, you don't. The entire firm's business model is based on, without wanting to get too boring about it, the law firm's business model is based on the fact that they've got 10 employees. Those 10 employees are going to work for 2,000 chargeable hours. And 2,000 times their charge out rate means X, which means that's the amount of money we're going to make. And therefore, we can base our entire business, that what we're going to pay people, what our overheads are going to be, based on that happening. Now, when that doesn't happen for someone, that's a real problem.
And where you've just said that it's 2,000 hours, etc., that must be quite competitive in the environment as well, because even though you're working with colleagues as such, it's almost like who is going to be billing more, and that sounds quite lonely.
It's a very competitive process, and the numbers get published every year as to how people have done and what they've done. There's a time at one firm I was at where they just adopted a policy for 2 or 3 years where the bottom 10% will let go.
Wow.
So you are encouraged to take more on, because you actually don't want to be the person who's only just met their hours. You want to be the person that's busted their hours considerably and turned it into cash, and attracted clients in and done a really good job.
So it's not enough just to do what's expected of you. No. You've got to go that extra mile. You've got to take on the extra. You've got to convert. All sounds like a lot of pressure.
If you want to get on as a lawyer, you can't just be a good lawyer. You've got to develop a client base. And that client base is then loyal to you. So you have to work that client base quite hard. And then you get very nervous about letting other people into that client base as well, because everyone's like trying to get their own little bit of cash. So barristers' chambers are different to law firms. Barristers' chambers are a lot of sole practitioners dealing under just an umbrella, but they very rarely work as big teams. In law firms, in theory, you work as big teams, but the reality is there's a lot of healthy or unhealthy competition at the same time.
So you mentioned earlier about a poor experience and almost difficult time for you, and you've just mentioned there the pressure of the environment, the competitiveness, the expectation to perform, this being in the dreaded thought of being in the bottom 10%. How did you cope with that?
You just get on with it. You kind of don't know anything else. You think this is just the way it's going to be, and you also you watch other people in the office, and you don't really, until you get a bit older and a little bit wiser, and you start having better, more purposeful conversations. You don't really see what's going on, behind. So you think everyone's firing on all cylinders, which of course no one is. You can't do it for a long period of time consistently. At some point, you can't overperform and carry on overperforming. So, but you convince yourself that everyone else is doing it, and therefore I better do it as well.
So you said you just get on with it, but then you've mentioned high pressure. You've obviously experience shown, like from your personal experience, that you adapt to it. You have more purposeful conversations, etc. But how did you manage from a mental health perspective to keep that balance of, okay, work is high pressure, there's a massive expectation. How did you balance that?
You need a really good support network outside of work.
Okay.
You've got to be and again, probably, look, when I first qualified, mobile phones didn't exist. That's how old I am. So mobile phones didn't exist, email didn't exist, and what have you. So when you went home at night, you went home.
Right.
I think the reality for a lawyer working in the mid to top tier law firm these days is you're never off the job. And we had a session once. One of the firms that I worked at, they'd heard about mental health problems and wanted to do something about it. So they brought a professor in who was a brilliant guy, and he talked all afternoon about how to recognize problems and how to deal with them. And we all had to do a point scoring exercise in it, and you got minus points if you had certain behaviors and plus points if you had other behaviors. And the bottom number was like -8 or something, and then anything above 0 was good. And if you got up to 15, which was the top mark, or 17, which was the top mark, then you were doing really, really well. And no one was above 0. All the partners in the room, no one was above 0. Everyone looked at their phone last thing at night. Everyone looked at their phone first thing in the morning. Everyone had worked from home. Everyone had worked on their holidays. It was just it's just a constant thing. So you're never really that far away. And clients pay lawyers a lot of money, right? We're not a cheap resource at all. And some clients actually quite like bothering you out of hours. I had one client who used to ring me if I was going away on holiday. He'd ring me on holiday on purpose to ask me to do something, and I say, "I'll get someone in the office to do it." He said, "No,
I want
you to do it." Lovely guy, really liked him, but that was just his personality. So it's you have to make the most of. You have to do two things. First of all, you have to make the most of your personal time, what personal time you've got, and therefore I've been very lucky. I've got an incredibly supportive partner. I've got a great family. That doesn't come without its own stresses and strains, but overall, very, very positive thing. I love to be able to go home at night and they're there. As far as work's concerned, you have to remind yourself that you enjoy the job.
Right.
You have to, yes, you might have just spent 10 hours, 12 hours, 14 hours working on something. Yes, you might be exhausted, but did you do something? Did you achieve something? Did you build something? Did you solve a problem for a client? If you don't get pleasure from that, I think you're in trouble.
Right, so that's what keeps you going.
Yeah.
It's that feeling that actually I'm doing the job, I'm doing it well, I've helped someone out. So that reminder that you're achieving that within your working day keeps you going.
Yeah, look, different areas of law can be quite destructive. So at one point, I used to do mortgage litigation work, and you're kicking people out of their homes.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to get job satisfaction out of that. Well done, you just kicked the family of 4 out. But you have to remind yourself you didn't do it. You're just basically putting into place the fact that they didn't pay the mortgage, and therefore there's a process that needs to be gone through. But by and large, you just have to realise that law gives you an amazing opportunity. I travel the world. I speak at industry events. I've met some incredible people that I've been very lucky to call some of them friends, but also people that I really respect. Sometimes you'll go into, if in litigation, you'll be lucky enough to get involved in a court of appeal process or even a House of Lords process, and you're watching the best people in the profession at their work, and that's fantastic.
Yeah, sounds like being in a live movie.
A little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit. As long as you haven't got Donald Trump for a client, you're okay.
Yeah. So I'm going to move on now to some questions around the workplace. A lot of businesses are tackling mental health, and there's a real risk if companies don't get this right. Could you give us an insight into how you or your team tackle well-being?
So we're not a big firm. So we're quite fortunate in that everyone knows each other very well. We obviously try to have the odd team building event and Christmas dinners and what have you. By and large, it's about talking to people, having conversations with people which aren't just about work, but are about how you're doing, but actually listening to what they've got to say as well. You can have these very facile conversations with people and then not remember where they went on, that they were going on holiday tomorrow to wherever, you know. You've got to listen and reflect back, and then just remember and make them feel valued. I think it's so important. When I was at one firm, I had a team who were exclusively female, and quite a few of them got pregnant in a reasonably short period of time. You wouldn't believe how many of them were petrified of the conversation they were about to have to say, I'm pregnant, which should be one of the best moments of their life.
Yeah.
And they were really scared about what the reaction would be from the partner. I've always been absolutely thrilled for them, and I'm always genuinely thrilled. I think kids are great, but that's not the reaction that you would typically get. I've heard of some people going, "Oh, for God's sake, how are we going to do X, Y, Z?"
Yeah.
You know, that was their immediate reaction, which is awful.
Yeah.
So you've got to be friendly.
Yeah. So connection is really important. And that's what keeps your team together, making that time to really listen, connect, reflect, and almost make it a safe space for them to come to you and say, look, I'm going through this issue, I've got this concern, and you've been able to talk through and find a way to support them.
You've got to move away from a blame culture. It's very important I'm more than happy that any of my team want to try and do something, they can go off and do it. And if it doesn't work, we learn from why it didn't work, and then we go and try and do something different. Some cultures, and certainly some law firms, are just scared to stick their head above the parapet because you don't want to be seen to be linked to a failure in any way, shape, or form. I think that's really unhealthy.
Yeah. But it's almost like you've got the idea that, well, if we try something and we don't get it right and we make a mistake, we learn from it, we move on. But it sounds like other people are almost scared to even consider that as an option because failure is deemed such an awful thing.
So the first firm that I really loved working at, that went from a UK law firm to being the biggest law firm in the world in certain measures, and certainly in terms of the numbers of lawyers. And they achieved that because they let people take risks, and they let people try and develop, and gave you an awful lot of autonomy in the way that you were going to do work. And I think that's super important. People don't grow and develop. Now, not everybody wants to do that. Yeah. Some people are more than happy to come in and get the job done and go home at the end of the day. And that's absolutely fine, because there's places for those people in there. You have to, but you don't, until you talk to these people and work out what makes them tick and recognize those traits, and you don't know.
And again, that sounds like a person needs to decide what culture do they want to be a part of. Do I want to be part of that culture where I can have the autonomy to go off and explore and try different things? Or do I stay in a culture where I'm almost told what to do and how to do it and mechanically get through my day? Which option, where do I want to be?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, no one makes you work for a massive law firm. You decide that you want to apply for that job and go and work for them. I think the thing that law firms get wrong for me is that the people that run the law firms are lawyers. They're not businessmen. They're actually lawyers who are very, very good at doing litigation or banking or corporate or commercial. And so instead of letting them carry on doing banking, corporate, commercial litigation, they say, here you go, here's a management role for you. And it's not for everyone. Yeah. It's not for everyone at all. But I don't think lawyers typically make great managers. And that's partly because they know what the pressure, they know what they have to give and actually deliver to make the firm work. So they've got.
So it's almost like, again, you're describing another layer of stress within sort of the industry of how can I manage a team when I've already got so much to deal with and deliver, and there's so many expectations put upon me. How can I do that well and that well?
You just have to find time, but everything's deadline orientated, and particularly, look, from something as basic as conveyancing, everyone wants a house bought,
yesterday.
Straight away. Exactly. Yeah. So who's going to tell that client? If I've got a choice about telling someone in my team I'm sorry, you have to work a couple of hours longer and get that thing done because it needs to get done because of X, Y, and Z. Or turning around to a client saying, sorry, we were just a bit too busy for you. And it's the same with, and it's the same with the people in your team. You just can't be forever taking from them and not be trying to give anything back. It's just really unhealthy.
Yeah. Sounds like it's quite demanding being a lawyer. Give me a time where you've had to exert yourself to meet the demands of your client.
So there's one time I was away. I was away skiing. Love to ski once a year, and I was there with my wife. And you go off in the morning and you try and ski for a few hours. And the client wanted a phone call at 11 o'clock. It took a while to work out the time difference, but anyway, I worked out that I needed to be on the phone for that time. So we were trying to ski to somewhere where I could take the call. The problem is when you're halfway up a mountain, wherever you go, there's an awful lot of noise if you go into cafes and what have you. So I thought I'd take the call outside. As it happened, I was still halfway down a run when the call started. So I ended up speaking for 15 minutes whilst I was trying to get down a blue run in Val d'Isère, which was fun. And I did apologise for the heavy breathing from time to time on the on the conference call, but I couldn't move the call, so I couldn't work that around my life. And my wife is quite insistent that I need to put the phone down more than I do.
And you've killed the myth there that men can't multitask.
Well, no, we can.
Yeah.
We can. We can eat and breathe at the same time, for example. I'm very good at that.
So I've got some stats here from some research that we've looked at about workplace and mental health. I'm going to ask you some questions. What percentage of people have long-term sick leave at work as a result of stress, anxiety, and depression?
I would imagine around 25%. I would imagine.
It's 51%.
Is it really? Wow.
How many percentage of people do you think feel exhausted at the end of each working day?
In law?
Just in general.
Just in general, I'd say around 50% there.
Close, it's 61%.
Yeah.
And how many percentage of people do you think feel that work is getting more intense and demanding?
Almost everybody.
Yeah. It's 55%. And from what you described earlier on about the change because of now mobile phones and emails and you almost not getting that switch off, I would have expected that figure to be a bit higher as well. Yeah,
although obviously some people don't have office jobs with that. If you're doing physical jobs, so one of my brothers was a carpet fitter. When he went home, he went home. You don't get that phone call at 10 o'clock at night.
That is true, yeah. And what do you think the benefits of investing in employee well-being?
Again, I can only talk from experience. So from a law firm experience, if your team are healthy and well, they will work better. And if that happens, then you make more money. Okay, and you hit your targets, and that's at the heart of it. I mean, leaving aside, and that's a very selfish position because that's financially orientated, right? You don't want to work in an environment which is unhappy.
Yeah.
You just don't. It's unhealthy for everybody.
Yeah.
So you want to create a nice environment. There's some basics, I think, in life. When you come in the morning, you say hello properly to the guy on security because he's got the worst job in the world, right? He's just sat there, and so a bit of interaction with him is great. When you're walking around the office, you make an effort to go in, knock on the door, open up, ask how people are, how is it going, what have you. If they're busy, you make sure you go back at a later point. If you don't do these things, you don't know what's happening. And if you don't know what's happening, you don't know whether someone can take a little bit more work, or if someone can, if someone just needs a bit of help with something, or what have you. It's just bad management.
So from your perspective, it's having that, once again, that connection is important. It's making sure that the environment is a happy place, talking to people, asking them how they are, offering them support when they need it, but also making sure that if people are happy and comfortable within their workplace, they're going to perform better.
Yeah, but it can't always be happy, right? So if we've got a deadline, I'm not creating that deadline, but I'm the arsehole that's telling people that they're going to have to work until midnight to get something done. You can try and be empathetic to a certain point, but at the end of the day, it still has to get done as well. So it can't all be, you know, fun and happy. And I do like the idea that when we have team meetings and when we work together, it is a team effort, and that we can all depend upon each other, and that we're going to have a laugh on the way. At the same time, that you've got to get the work in.
And it almost sounds like in preparing people and letting a lot of your staff know that actually it's not all going to be, roses and chocolates and a wonderful experience. We are under pressure. We do have to meet that demand. If we do that together as a team, we can get through it.
Yep.
It makes a difference.
Yeah, exactly that.
This is the part of the show where we're going to talk about ways people can manage their mental health. And today I've chosen self-care as a topic.
Okay.
What do you do for self-care?
I think I've touched on it before. First of all, you've got to recognise. I think if you've had depression, and I've had depression, you've got to be careful not to slip back into it, and it creeps up on you.
Yeah.
And you don't realise it's happening, and then suddenly you realise that everything's flat. There's no peaks and troughs anymore. You're not really having any emotional highs, any emotional lows. Everything just feels like a different shade of grey, and you have to be able to recognise that that's happening to you. Or listen to people who are talking to you, and they're not saying directly, "Or are you depressed?" But are you okay? If people start asking you repeatedly, "Are you okay?" You've got to, am I projecting something here? And then why am I projecting that with them? And then try and work that out. Now, I have always, I go back to basics for me at that point, which is one of the things I really, really enjoy. So I'll go and I'll take my son swimming, or go for a cycle ride, or whatever it is, and just make sure that I'm enjoying it. And if I'm not enjoying it, if I wasn't really enjoying it, I think I'd probably go and seek some help at that point, because my personal view, I think life's tougher now than it ever was. I mean, on those percentages, I think life is very, very difficult. I think for youth of today, to get a job is really, really hard. Yeah. To keep that job, to excel at that job, and to get on with that job, and to recognise what you want to be. I think it's an incredibly difficult environment that we put them in. I'm not sure how well prepared they are for it, because they come out of an educational system which almost gives them a false sense of
what to expect.
Yeah. And also a false sense of their own worth. I don't mean to be controversial about that, but what I mean is that, and I'm older, so when old people get together, we always complain about, the youth of today. They've got it easy, but when you look at the number of A grades that get handed out, and A stars, and you move. For me, an A was your top, then it goes to an A star. It's we're kind of rewarding because we want to encourage, we want to be, and that's fantastic. But then you get out into the real world, and the real world doesn't seem to work like that at all. And I think it's a real culture shock for the youth. My daughter was complaining absolutely bitterly to me the other day, because her work finished at 5 o'clock and she got a phone call at 5:30. She's like, "Who do they think they are?" It's like, what are the people who pay you that gives you the chance to, do all the things you like to do? So it's how do I cope? For me, it's about recognizing if there's a problem.
Right.
And that's really difficult, because you get into a fog.
So what I'm hearing you say there is that you've got to sort of almost catch it when you're feeling flat, before it escalates into something further.
Yes.
When you get to that stage, you make sure that you pick an activity that you actually enjoy. Going out swimming with your son, for example. If you go out on that activity and you realise, actually, I'm not enjoying this when I usually do enjoy this. Actually, this is a time when I need to get some help, because I don't want to end up in that dark place that I've been before.
Exactly that. You've got to, but no one can do it for you. You've got to want to do it. You've got to want to do it yourself. And I also think it's incredibly difficult to find the right person to go to for help. When I was going through a divorce, and I found the whole process very difficult. And Mum's a Catholic, so I feel guilty that the sun doesn't rise in the morning, sort of thing. So I had some cognitive behavioural therapy for it, and they don't tell you the answers; they just let you work these things out for yourself. It took a while for me to realise that the divorce wasn't my fault. It was there were two people in the marriage. It sounds like a really silly thing, and you look back and it's the most obvious thing in the world. But when you're in the middle of it, you can't see it.
No.
You can't see it at all. So, however you achieve it, you've got to be able to recognise that you're not performing or enjoying yourself or whatever it is. Something's changed. Something's different. And when that happens, you've then got to think, right, do I need, what can I do about it? What would work? Do I need to speak to a doctor? Doctors are difficult for me because GPs, I think, do an incredibly difficult job in incredibly difficult circumstances. I just don't think they're geared up. So for me, going to someone specialist has to be the way forward.
And it's difficult because if you go to the doctor, they're either going to recommend medication or they're going to put you on a waiting list, but you need that help in that moment at that time. You don't want to wait on a waiting list.
No. And you then feel a sense that the world's against you, which fuels.
Which is quite common if your mental health isn't in a good place.
But you feel so alone. Yeah. And you want someone there to help and to talk. So the bits you can play as a human being is just make sure you do talk to people. I think it's incredibly helpful. But when you're experiencing this yourself, you need to find someone to be able to have a conversation with. And I've had conversations with, to my best friends, I can tell them anything at all. And you know what? Not once have they ever said, "Well, you're half a man. You are worthless." They understand, and it's amazing how once you start talking about it, they've had similar experiences, variations on the theme.
So it's crazy, isn't it? Because sometimes we're scared to share those things with other people without realising that they've actually experienced a very similar thing at the same time, and we can learn from each other's experiences and guide each other.
Yeah. No one can be happy all the time. It's impossible.
How was your experience of therapy?
I didn't get it at the beginning, and my personality is such that I used to try and make her lose a temper because I thought that was really funny. And I managed it once at
Every
one point.
therapist's dream,
So overall, I look back at it and it shaped me to where I am today. There's no doubt at all that I thought I was the problem. I thought everything, it was, I had this, it's a fairly familiar thing. So I've got a decent job. I'm married, I'm healthy, what have you. Who am I to think that, there's something wrong with me? Why, you almost feel guilty for not enjoying yourself. And working through, she used to do lots of little Venn diagrams and what have you, which was I found really sort of fascinating. Never really understood all of them, if I'm completely honest. But frankly, she's been one of the most important people in my life.
Oh, good. So what advice would you give to someone if they were nervous or worried or thinking about therapy?
So I think you've got to say, what's the worst thing that can happen if you go and speak to somebody, against what's the worst thing that can happen if you don't?
Yeah.
Right. For the sake of an hour of your time, what have you, first of all, just convince yourself that it's confidential, right? It is confidential. And in my experience, what you say in these things is very much, it doesn't go anywhere else. Work doesn't need to know about it unless you get to the point where you want to go and talk to them because you are really impacted in the way that you'll be going about doing your job. So for me, the downside is if you don't do something about it, you will not self-heal. I'm convinced about that. Some people might, but I don't think the majority of the people will, because the problems that got you into that are all there. They're not going away. You have to be able to compartmentalize them and put them into context, and you have to have someone to help you work through these things. And it's not a sign of weakness to go and seek help. It's actually a sign of strength, in my view, in that you're saying, I want to be a better person. Not just for me, but for the people around me.
And you mentioned there about I don't need to go and tell work about it. And this is what this podcast is all about, because such a hype at the moment in terms of corporates, workplaces, talking about the well-being of their staff, etc., etc. But yet there still seems to be that stigma attached to going to HR, that concern about reaching out to a manager or someone at work and saying to them, I'm having this difficulty.
Yeah, again, I can only talk about my own personal experience. If you are working in a law firm or an accountancy practice or in any of the professions, going to HR and saying you've got a problem with your brain doesn't seem to be the most sensible thing to do, because there's no doubt that that information is going to get fed around, because people will need to know, and therefore people will sit on it. I think people find it very difficult to share that. And in my experience, the one time I did share it at work, I lost my job.
But then at the same time, isn't that something that needs to change in terms of the attitude and the opinion of these workplaces? Because you said yourself, you were a little bit nervous, not really sure what to expect from it. You were almost playing games with your therapist in the beginning. But yeah, actually it shaped you and you've learned so much. And it sounds like you're still applying what you've learned in your daily life today.
There's no doubt that I'm a better lawyer today, partly because of that journey. No doubt whatsoever. Law firms and a lot of businesses are based on their accounts for that financial year. So long-term fixes don't fit particularly well with that very short-term churn. So it's a difficult one, and I've had a lot of sympathy with large corporates, any corporates, who've got their overheads and what have you. Finding that balance, anyone who actually finds that balance is, I think, is going to be ahead of the game. But the reality is that these problems are, they don't get solved overnight. So it's not something you can fix overnight, and therefore it's a very difficult thing to be having people in there and having working on themselves instead of working on their work.
In your experience, how long do you think it took you to see a benefit from your therapy?
I got signed off, said, look, fine. We actually got to the point probably where we were just having friendly chats almost, rather than actually talking about. And I went to go and watch. I went to go and watch a film, and I ended up crying in the film. And because obviously, very emotional moment. I can't remember what it was. Iron Man dying or something. I don't know what it was, but and I'd never experienced that emotional low before. And I thought, oh God, I'd rather be depressed than be flat, But actually, you suddenly realise that you're experiencing
feelings,
real proper feelings and proper peaks. So amazing moments of where you're genuinely laughing. You're not laughing because everyone else in the room is laughing. You're genuinely laughing because something's funny or whatever it was. And you just feel happy in yourself. And I just remember crying, thinking, oh, right. Oh, that's what it's all about. Yeah.
So in a way, there is something to be learnt from that, isn't there? Because if people were more able to come out and say, I need support, they get the support, they go to therapy, rather than going through the rigmarole of a staff member staying quiet, not performing, not seeking help, then almost getting to the point where they can't avoid saying anything because it's really affecting them, then being moved on, then someone else going through the interview process, being trained up, being brought up to speed with how the law firm likes doing their processes and practices. It would be quicker just to support the person in the first place.
Oh, so that hidden cost is absolutely disastrous. So lateral hires are always very difficult to actually fit in. They're very expensive. The recruitment process very expensive. You spend a lot of time investing in those people. And yes, you're quite right. Wouldn't you be better off investing time with someone who was a very trusted person in the organisation who was tailed off for some reason? Let's address that and try and bring that person around. Far better way to do it. Some people like to put an elastoplast over it.
Yeah. If only we lived in an ideal world.
Well, exactly.
Yeah. So, as a theme for the show, we've decided we're going to ask all our guests a closing question. And the question is, what advice would you give to your younger self?
Wake up every morning and attack the day.
Attack the day. Well, thank you very much for your time and for sharing. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Me too. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you to my guest, Tim, for joining me today. Thank you all for listening at home. Please like, share and follow the podcast. We are the Silent Epidemic. See you next time.